having on our show Muthuraman, who's one of the co-founders of Swarajya, as well as a leading investment banker who advises MSMEs on various transactions. So we are going to have a discussion today on the MSME package that the government says it is working on. It's a kind of work in progress, and though there have been repeated criticism that this MSME package has been delayed, and though the government has clarified that it's working on it, so let's take this opportunity, hoping that government is going to release the MSME package anytime soon. But let's try to understand from Muthu, who has very serious expertise on these subject, about how government should be designing this MSME package. Muthu, great to have you on show. Look forward to asking you a few questions around how we could design this package. So first thing, Muthu, as you are aware, there is a very strong possibility that the MSME package should be announced by the government anytime soon. So broadly speaking, there is a realization that the MSME is facing a huge liquidity challenge. So despite the fact that RBI is kind of fueled enough liquidity in the system, it is not getting transmitted to the entrepreneurs, and more so the MSMEs, because of the reluctance of the banks to lend. So let's look at the different components of the MSME package, Muthu. What I feel, the first thing that I would want to ask you is in terms of if you take the US, one of the most significant packages that Trump administration rolled out, and which was phenomenally successful, though it ran out of money very quickly, was the what was called as the payroll protection program. Actually, I think almost 500 billion, no questions asked, and a whole lot of companies availed it actually. So if you assume that the coming MSME package has to have some kind of a wage subsidy program, what is your thinking on how it needs to be designed? What should be the linchpin of this, either the PF, ESI? How does government go about targeting and designing this program?
See, the government has taken a lot of measures in the last 3-4 years to get a lot of unorganized sector workers into the organized sector by subsidizing the employer contribution of PF, by introducing a unique identification number for each PF and linking it with Aadhaar to eliminate duplicity and all that. So today the PF database is a fairly accurate database. It maybe covers about 6.5-7 crore employees. Obviously, still a lot more in the unorganized sector. Absolutely. But even where it is organized sector, which large majority of them will be from the MSMEs, as in the EPFO organization itself has undergone drastic changes. I feel that is the organization is well equipped to roll out a scheme like this to allow an employer, each of the employers, to draw a equivalent of a 12-month payroll, not the CPF contribution, gross it up to the payroll and obtain it as a loan to be repaid over 2 years, 3 years. That will immediately provide the adequate liquidity, which the banks, see, the challenge with banks is that banks have to go through a credit risk process, a credit evaluation process. At this point of time, when everything is in a lockdown, bank will not be in any position to assess how soon this company is going to resume its normal level of activity and all that. Whereas non-bank entities, like for example, this EPFO has a track record of the employer contributing for a few years. So it will know what is the level of payroll that the company has been remitting. Based on that, a loan program can be easily rolled out rather than relying on banks for this.
Yeah. So Muthu, let's say, what would be the kind of the size of this kind of a wage support program that we are looking at? Any numbers that you have in mind? Like you're saying that probably if you're looking at a 8 crore PF
gross up
database.
From the PF, you can gross it up to the salary, and I would expect that either a grant for 6 months or a loan for equivalent for say 12 to 18 months would be a decent enough cushion. See, the thing is 40 days, and we don't know how long it is going to extend. Let's assume it is 3 months. Government is expecting the MSME to make the pay, don't withhold the pay is what the Prime Minister
Yeah.
requested the MSMEs. It's not
And
an
I think
order, it's
some
a
rules,
request.
some states have even gone ahead and made it mandatory for making the payments, right? It's just not the
that
moral
that
persuasion
that won't hold in law,
law.
but yes, as in irrespective of that, as in my sense is if something like this is rolled out, a 6 month payroll equivalent as a grant up to a limit. For example, in US they had a maximum limit of 10 million for each entity. As we
Oh,
say,
yeah.
we cannot afford a 10 million, it can be even 10 crores for maximum limit for each entity, or even lesser than that, even a 5 crore limit for each entity. But with the plan to compute it based on say 12-month average payroll, that will provide a tremendous cushion to MSMEs.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
advantage of a limit is that this will not be so to say usurped by large corporates, because
Correct.
for large corporates a 5 crore additional loan or a scheme is not going to entice
Make
them
any
much,
difference.
but it is going to be a lifeline for many MSMEs.
Wonderful. So let's move to the next part of the, how an MSME package is likely to look. We'll go to the credit guarantee at the end of the interview, but before that, I want to, pick up some insights from you about the other kind of benefits that can be provided. So let's look at the tax aspect, Muthu, actually, in terms of, let's say, the TDS and
Yeah,
also in terms of GST. Both are significant liquidity lockers for MSME, so as to
that's
speak.
right. Yeah,
So do you have like any suggestions
yeah.
where some kind of a tax relief in terms of especially GST and also TDS that can be provided as a kind of a loan or advance which can be adjusted later. Any suggestions around that, Muthu?
See, TDS is a money that belongs to the government.
Government.
So you are just an agent to collect on behalf of the government. So the best that the government, it's even fair to ask the government is allow some time to make the payment. Say a 3 month deferral, as in just extend the deadline by 3 months. If today TDS collected in January, have to be paid by 5th of February.
Correct.
So, or 7th of February. And instead of that, you extend it by 3 months' time. That will provide immediate liquidity. But beyond that, TDS do not have much leeway to help MSMEs. But on the other hand, the GST can provide a fairly significant relief to MSMEs. And there are very innovative ways, and we have had history of utilizing these schemes. There used to be a scheme called IFST, interest free sales tax loan, to encourage companies to come and set up capital expenditure. Many states used to offer these IFST loans where you collect the sales tax but do not and file the returns, so create a liability but pay it after a long period of time. It is treated as
Okay.
a interest free loan. So a similar scheme, obviously subject to a cap to ensure that this is not a serious fiscal blow on the government. Subject to a cap, you can introduce a interest-free GST scheme where the GST is collected, returns are filed, and this is treated as a interest-free loan for a period of say 3 years or 5 years or even longer. The advantage of this is that one, it provides the liquidity to the MSMEs because they collect the cash from their customers, but retain it within their system to meet their working capital needs. The second advantage is that the government can securitize these receivables easily and
Easily.
issue bonds. And so there is not going to be a serious cash
Dent on
flow
the
or a
finances.
fiscal burden on the government. This can immediately, anyway, it's a receivable over a 3 year or a 5 year period that can be securitized, and government can issue bonds that again can be subscribed, allowed for subscription by public. So different innovative ways are there, but the crux of it is that allow the MSMEs to collect the GST and convert it into a interest-free loan for say 3 years or 5 years.
Yes. Okay. Muthu, moving on to the next point, since you have written very copiously on this particular issue in terms of the difficulties that the MSME has been facing, one of the issues that you and other commentators have repeatedly highlighted has been the failure of banks, so as to speak, in terms of transmitting credit, especially to the MSME. Like despite the fact that government being relentlessly communicating to the banks to increase the credit offtake to the MSMEs, there is a serious reluctance, or whatever be the reason within the banking system, to support the MSMEs in terms of the liquidity. So, do you can I mean, do you have like any suggestions in terms of how non-banking channels can be effectively utilized to transmit credit to
Yeah.
MSMEs?
So just the two recent examples that I gave you, a GST or a PF loans. So EPFO can provide the PF loans. GST, the consolidated fund, can provide
Provide.
the GST deferral schemes. TDS liquidity again from the consolidated fund. Uh, okay, let me just take a minute to explain where we face the challenge with respect to the banks. See, banks have been facing serious NPA issues
Right.
for many years now, and on top of it, an event like this, a Corona kind of this thing, an unprecedented, unanticipated event like this, we don't know who is going to survive this downturn and who is going to fold up. And so credit assessment at this point of time is a serious challenge. As in, I've spent 13 years in CRISIL, so I understand where the banks could face this challenge. So I'm not placing entire blame at this point of time on banks, but in the past, banks have not been a useful instrument in transmitting the government policy to this thing. Even in this, for example, RBI had given a moratorium of 3 months. Many banks have interpreted it the way they want to, and in fact the funniest thing is banks are saying that okay, March, April, May you don't pay, but pay two times the EMI in June, July and August.
Oh, okay.
How's an MSME going to meet that obligation? I mean, it's in some cases personal loans, for example, housing loans, etc. The March, April, May EMI due is treated as a principal and added to the principal, and so the tenure is extended. Instead of 10 years, it could be 10 years and 8 months, or if it is 15 years, it will be
Yeah.
15 years and 9 months, something like that. Whereas in the case of term loans with MSMEs or working capital loan interest, as in some banks have given, as in instance, obviously it has come from the highest levels at the banks, have given instruction to the branches, say that, okay, give the deferment for this 3 months period, March, April, May, but collect them in June, July and August, double the amount that you would otherwise collect, so that this amount is set off. I think that is going to push a lot of them over the edge to become an NPA.
Correct.
So this is one example how banks are, as in the sense, are not very useful in transmitting the government's policy initiatives. So there are few other ways. For example, there's going to be a serious export shortfall challenge for, say, for
Correct.
example, textile sector and gems and jewelry sector, etc. At the same time, there's also an opportunity, which means that many of these
Supply chain shift.
textile this thing as in imports from China is going to move to other countries. So India can capitalize on this by, say, for example, using Exim Bank, provide long-term extended credit for imports from India. Uh, Obviously, as in the sense, comparable countries, Bangladesh or Vietnam, etc., cannot offer that kind of, they don't have that kind of a financial muscle to provide, whereas India has. So that can seriously support. That's another example of bypassing, so to say, the banking system. Just to clarify, banking system has a useful role to play, but that will take time for transmission and it will not be uniform. They are going to
Patchy.
look at credit assessment a lot more seriously and may not look at say borderline MSMEs, etc., which could mean a make or break situation for these guys. So announcing a package and depending on banks to transmit it to MSMEs may not always work. That is a limited point.
It's not a So basically it's not a very optimal kind of a
It is not.
solution.
As in, you don't say that nothing should be done to banks. Obviously, you have to, because banks are the bulwark of credit in the country.
Credit.
So you need to use banks, but at the same time explore non-banking options. Another
Correct.
one, for example, is, say, today, just a couple of days back, RBI opened a liquidity window for mutual funds to overcome the liquidity that they face in the debt funds, for example, after the Franklin Templeton fiasco.
Franklin Templeton
A
fiasco.
similar liquidity window can be offered for NBFCs. So banks are, after the ILFS, banks are very reluctant to directly lend to NBFCs. So many of the small, mid-sized NBFCs are facing serious challenge in continuing their business. And they are actually on the ground, as in whether it is two-wheeler financing or a consumer vehicle financing or car financing, many of these, they are actually on the ground, not the banks.
Banks.
So if, when the pipe crosses from the banks to NBFCs, that reflects in demand shortfall.
Yeah.
So a liquidity window directly
Made available
with
to the
between
NBFCs.
RBI and NBFC. See, obviously, any of these all these NBFCs are regulated by RBI. Periodic returns are filed. They will have a better pulse on these NBFCs. They can
Okay.
devise a scheme and provide a liquidity window for NBFCs to securitize some of their assets and immediately realize
Okay.
funds.
So Muthu, I would imagine that the MSME package, whenever it is going to be announced, the key component or the centerpiece of that is likely to be a credit guarantee fund, which I
Yes.
think is going to be very critical because at some level you need to incentivize the bankers to have some courage to go and let out
Yeah.
start lending to MSME and all, which is not going to be possible without a credit guarantee fund. So based on your practical insights in understanding the MSME ecosystem and how the credit transmission happens, what are your suggestions for designing a credit guarantee scheme that could really help the MSMEs?
Yeah. See, the a credit guarantee is like an insurance product. So
Yes.
the buyer of that insurance have to have a trust that the insurer will honor in times of a distress. Without that, nobody is going to take an insurance policy. That trust between banks and the current existing credit guarantee institution, that is CGT SMF, is broken
Broken.
completely. So, as in started in 1999, almost on same time when China and Korea also started credit guarantee. Today, China alone has 4,000 credit guarantee institutions. 7% of GDP in Korea has some form of credit guarantee, and a thriving credit guarantee market and industry is there. Whereas India, it is maybe 0.01 percentage of GDP is covered under credit guarantee. So it's a brilliant idea, can definitely help MSMEs to immediately access credit, but the current CGT SME institution is broken. A new institution has to be formed with adequate capitalization. It's a brilliant tool for the government to leverage on what they give. Other in the sense, they give 10,000 crores, that can give credit guarantee to 5 lakh crores at
Correct.
2% claim ratio. So the impact is very high
Multiplier effect is
to the
phenomenal.
MSMEs, and the fiscal impact is low for this thing, except that the implementation is key here. So here the challenge is the trust between the banks and CGT SME is completely broken. So today no bank encourages any application under the CGT SME scheme, and so capitalizing CGTSME more and asking banks to lend more based on this scheme is not going to work. Even if the quantum is small, say instead of 2 crores, you want to give 1 crore, but give 100% guarantee or 90% guarantee. And through a new institution, that is going to have a big impact on MSMEs in accessing this credit, is my suggestion. Yeah.
Wonderful. Muthu, you tangentially touched upon in a response to one of the previous questions about the export or the export
Yeah.
related sectors.
Yeah.
See, of course, like you say, globally, I think at least immediately there is not going to be a great boom in exports, but certainly because of the fact that there is a huge pushback against China and a whole lot of countries have recognized that de-risking the supply chain and that is going to be a reality very soon. So, in terms of any specific schemes, and of course, MSMEs will play a significant role in our
Right.
export engine.
Yeah.
So, anything that is export oriented measures that can be rolled out quickly so that, like say 6 months down the line when, the fear of the pandemic is gone and there is a economic activity that gets restored. uh, MSMEs will be in a position to take advantage of the export. So, what are your suggestions in the
Yeah,
export
see,
space?
one good example of, say, a successful example of Make in India is what happened in electronics.
Electronics.
So, serious application of mind, gradual this thing in terms of import duties for more value-added product imports and lesser duties for components and active encouragement of MNCs to set up factories in India have worked wonders in the electronics, particularly mobile manufacturing industry. So we need to have, I don't know if you followed the news yesterday. I think Tamil Nadu has set up a task force to
Task force, yeah.
attract attract
Some of these
foreign companies.
multinational corporations.
Particularly, they have identified the task force only from 5 countries. As in,
China, Taiwan, South
yeah,
Korea,
yeah,
US, and
yeah. Okay, so like that, a targeted scheme, as in individual states can do targeting different industries, etc. But instead of a general en masse invitation, targeted schemes like that will work better in my view. And
wonderful.
scale attracts scale. So if there are other than 10 guys in mobile manufacturing who have set up, 30 more guys are setting up the next year. So like that, you have to identify specific sectors where we have a competitive advantage, where we have a skilled manpower, and this thing. And the generic omnibus condition is that your land acquisition, water availability, bureaucratic hassles in this thing, etc. Those need to be ironed out. But probably a central task force for specifically for this can help. But as in those are long term. As in those things don't change overnight, and that cannot
Correct.
happen in months' time.
One.
But as in a sense, this is a godsend opportunity, so to say. We have been hearing this that India missed the manufacturing bus. The corona has actually broken down that bus sometime down the line. We can quickly run and get along into that bus, provided our uh, policymakers, industries themselves, industry associations are able to act together to quickly identify specific industries
Correct.
where we have a competitive advantage, where we have an already built-in base of domestic companies and a domestic market that can be leveraged. That will work wonders.
Wonderful. Muthu, last question. One of the challenges that India has been facing in terms of rolling out any of these uh, packages to take care of, say, MSME or say the migrant labor has been the lack of a good database. I mean, I'm using this word for a want of a better thing. So, of course, this government can be given some credit for attempting to formalize uh, the workforce in terms of incentivizing them to move to PF and all that stuff. So your estimate about the PF database, let's assume that it has been deduplicated and cleaned up and all that, 8 crores, but still you're looking at least 30 crore to 40 crore type of a informal workforce actually. Let's say like at least 3 4 times the number of formal workforce would be the informal. What is the and it could be that these workforce will fall between in the sense that you target the vulnerable population with a package, you target the MSME, you target the corporates, but this informal workforce, how do you like say the people who work in the saloon, the other kind of labor,
Yeah.
how do you manage this actually to
See,
handle?
to put the numbers in context, roughly India has about 50 to 52 crore is the total workforce, of which as in 25, 26 crores is agricultural labor. Some form
Correct.
of agriculture,
Agree.
fisheries, animal husbandry, all put together. As in there, as in the sense how easy it is to create a database and reach them, etc. There's a different set of schemes available for farmers, different set of schemes available
Correct.
for
Including direct cash
fishermen and
transfer.
things like that. So the balance 50% is what is the challenge, of which
Challenge.
out of the 25 crores, we have probably 8 crores in the, so to
PF.
say, the organized net, and the remaining 16 crores is outside that organizing net. Three large sectors account for a bulk of that. As in, one is retail, one is construction, and the third is textile. These three will account for probably 75% of the remaining this thing. So there are industry associations, there are bodies. If there's a concerted effort by the government to get them on some form of this thing. So, for example, the unorganized labor insurance scheme and things like that have been started, but how far they have
Scaled up.
how far they have penetrated is remains to be seen. But there's an urgent need to form a database. If you recall, Jaggi has written in his book also, the where are the jobs? We don't know. The problem with the jobs debate is that we don't have data on jobs. So there definitely need to be created. PF for organized sector or pushing more and more people into organized sector is one. But then these three sectors, as in retail, construction, and textile, by its nature, will be difficult to get them into organized sector. And but a concerted effort to get people enrolled in some form of a scheme or a plan or an association will be helpful in formalizing that. Then there is a self-employed, your plumber, carpenter, barber, electrician, etc. That is going to be a challenge, and that every country faces that.
Every country will face. Muthu, thank you so much for your tremendous insights. Let's hope that the government comes out with the MSME package that kind of incorporates some of the suggestions that was made in the discussion and in some of the pieces that you have written for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
hope to talk to you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Prasanna. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.